I see what you mean. So empathy is such a big word, right? Because I think at the base level, it's so important for us to, as humans, be able to have empathy for any creature, anything, to feel something when another living being is being hurt, to be able to feel that. Now, you may not be able to do anything about it, but to feel it. And I think it becomes very scary in our society when that's not there anymore, when someone can be part of, say, a violent gang and get to that place where that part of them is so blocked off and hidden that they don't feel it anymore. Because when we don't have the capacity to feel another's suffering, then we can do very cruel things. And when we can just have that capacity to feel it. Now there's just feeling it, having that aspect to feel it, and then there's that feeling it and then doing something too. The kind of, maybe that's another step to it. But I think the first step is just feeling it. And from what I've been hearing with a lot of educators, the year of COVID where there wasn't any school and kids were less relating person to person and more online, that shifted something for them socially. And I think you can have maybe not so great social skills, but still feel empathy. But then as those social skills start to fall apart, I think that empathy can also fall apart. And so really starting with, because it's a feeling, right? It's, like if I put my hand on the table and I smashed it, kind of like you would have a sense of, ooh, I bet that hurt, because you would have a reaction. And I think it's important for children to get that, that to care about another's suffering. And then to take that piece and then to build the other skills around it. And how behaviors, because when you care about someone else's suffering and then you learn how a behavior can contribute to another person's suffering, that's another level. But that empathy is the base, I believe.
Okay, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. I have somebody on the show today who started out solving crime at a very young age and turned it into a career which turned into something completely different. So I'm so excited to have on today my guest, and we're going to transform in front of everyone today. We're going to go from one thing to another thing right here on the podcast. And my guest today is on the podcast. Cristal Cook is here. Cristal, welcome to the podcast. It's so great to have you on Living the Next Chapter.
Thank you, Dave. It's so fun to be here.
So as I alluded to, we're going to transform today. It's going to go from one thing to a completely different thing. And Operation Transformation that's what you are all about, is helping people go through that process and become something great, beautiful, and new. But I would love to kind of go back a little bit in your story, because we talked, and you used to solve crime at a very young age. And for me, it's a fun story, and I want to go behind the tape and hear all of the goodness of you at a young age solving crime in the major metropolis of 1,000 people in your town, I think. So can you take us there? Because I'm so enthralled by this and your story.
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. Well, when I was a child, I loved mysteries, Scooby-Doo and Nancy Drew and Encyclopedia Brown and Trixie Belden. Loved mysteries. Even loved like the grotesque, macabre type of homicide stuff. At the grocery stores, there were those magazines, and the detective ones, my mom would buy them for me, even though a child probably shouldn't be reading them. But for my mother, it was, as long as you're reading, let's let you read. And I was just so enthralled with anything crime related. And so as a child, my parents were very busy. They owned their own hardware store. And a friend of mine, we were probably in the 3rd grade, I think, we decided we were going to be private detectives. And so We made ourselves a little detective kit, had gloves so that we didn't leave fingerprints. We had a pad and a pen and a magnifying glass because every detective needs a magnifying glass. And in our little town, it wasn't crime ridden, right? But there was a lot of break-ins, a lot of these small mom and pop businesses, the gas stations, the little grocery stores, and my mom and dad's hardware store got broken into quite a bit, usually by teenage kids probably being naughty. But they would steal things. And so anytime there was a break-in, it's a small town, so it's not like we didn't get the information pretty quick. And oftentimes we were on the scene before the cops were. So we'd go out on the scene and we had our little pad and pen, and the business owners knew us. Back then it was a time where any adult in the town pretty much took up parenting responsibilities for any kid running around the town. So, they would entertain us, but they would really, what I loved about it is these business owners who knew us from the time we were tiny weren't like, get out of here, kid. We've got things to do. They treated us like we were actual serious detectives. And they would answer our questions like as if they were talking to a cop. And it really made us feel like we were solving crime. And they think the local marshal was like, well, these girls are just going to keep doing this, so we might as well deputize them. So they were so lovely. They took us into the little town hall and showed us how to do fingerprinting and took a picture of us, made us a little ID card, which we carried around everywhere. Private Eye, Crystal Cook, with my little detective card with my ID on it. And in our minds, we solved all the crimes, right? I mean, in our minds, we knew that this was probably a random hitchhiker coming through town that broke into the gas station and stole a bunch of gas and money. And so crime solved, let's move on to the next one, right? We weren't really thinking about needing to arrest anybody. And I guess the love of that never left. And I think my parents thought, oh dear, what is she going to get herself into? So really kind of steered me away from being a criminal investigator. But, when your passion's there, And, fast forward, 15 years, I became an FBI agent. And I guess went back to my childhood, law enforcement roots.
And you actually were legitimately allowed to be on scene and doing some amazing things. I have friends and relatives that serve as police officers and things, and I have a huge admiration for anyone that serves in that way. So thank you, first of all, for serving and serving your community and everything. Can you tell me just briefly, and I know we could talk about this for days, but a little bit of some of the training where you kind of walk into a role like this and some of the things that they pour into you to be an FBI agent? Because the reason I'm asking is I think some of that training stays with you. I don't think it just goes away whether or not you stay with the FBI. There's got to be training that they pour into you that helps you later on, even while you're writing. I'm sure there's some things that come back up in front of you that you've learned in the past. Can you share a little bit about the training process and what you learned about yourself becoming an FBI agent?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that even though it was not a career that was my passion, as it turned out, it wasn't my passion, I grew so much as a person. The 4 months at Quantico was incredible. And at several levels, it pushed me physically, to a level where I always thought I was in shape and could work out. But I pushed myself physically at a level when I worked out in Quantico that I never would have otherwise, to the point where you run so hard that you're throwing up at the end of the run. And so for me, I kind of got used to that. I can push myself beyond limits that I thought I had physically. And emotionally and mentally, it's just so grueling. There's a desensitization that takes place. We saw a lot of things in our training that I think was meant to not shock us, but to us to really to be able to be prepared to see pretty terrible things. And I think that built something in me, a level of resilience maybe. And I would say too, a level of courage that even now, Dave, it's like people will say, you did this and it was so courageous. I'm like, if someone's not kidnapping me and torturing me, like everything's gravy. To me, that's the only thing that really scares me, is something horrendous like that. Otherwise, nothing else is really scary to me. Not to say that I don't get nervous. I get nervous for sure. I get feeling like apprehensive, but I don't really feel that level of fear that could hold me back. And I think that came from Quantico, because you are pushed to so many levels. You're pushed to, if you make a mistake, there's this kind of a humiliation piece that takes place. That's kind of that mentality that it was. This was back 20 years ago. I don't know if it's still the same way, but so even if I get humiliated, it's not that big of a deal to me. It's like, so what? I'm not going to die from it. So I think it really built in me a level of, I can do this. And if I mess up, what's the worst that's going to happen? I may get embarrassed, but I pick up my pieces and I move on. So that level too of understanding that if I come to a hurdle or a barrier, it's not the end of the road. That things can get difficult and you move past it, because it was a challenging career. And it did help me to step outside of myself and being a little kind of shy. I was a very shy little girl. You wouldn't think so, being a private detective, as a little kid showing up to all the crimes, but I was a very shy kid. And I'm really not shy anymore. It really forced that out of me. So that, I think, is a level of training that never left me. And what helped me working with teens is I'm not a pushover, and I love teenagers. I love working with them, but they will lie to you. They just do. It's in their DNA. And I just, I would not fall prey to their sob stories. And I think with teenagers, that's a rite of passage for them, strangely enough. If they're not allowed to pull the wool over your eyes, it's kind of like you've earned a badge with them. And so I think that toughness, there's a softness to me, but definitely a level of toughness that never left me from the FBI. And I think that has served me well, because I'm not really a touchy-feely, be a doormat and be manipulated type of person. I think that I tend to trust people, but I also don't have that naivety that I would have had probably otherwise.
Yeah, that makes sense. And again, just the amount of...
And then I think, too, that's that quick reaction, too.
The amount of information that they teach, I would anticipate, just, again, going back to my reference of the people that I know that serve as police officers and the training they have, I just can imagine the amount of input and training that they want to put into you so that you can serve and perform in a way that you're called to do. So I'm just fascinated by it. And when we talked earlier, you had mentioned this path that you were on. But what I love is how you've transformed from that role, because I believe you were mentioning you were out jogging one day or something, and you're like, this is not feeding me, or this is not feeding my soul. I need to make a change. And you really lived out what you're doing now personally in that moment. And you transformed, even when some people might say, what are you doing? You've got this dream job. You're trained. You're helping people. Why would you leave? Why would you walk away from this? Can you take us back to that jog when you finally realized that there was a transformation happening for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I was realizing is that it wasn't like when I was a kid being a private detective. There's a lot of bureaucracy at the federal level. There's a lot of politics, as you can only imagine. And I don't even really, that's a whole other show. But there was something missing for me. And I did the training with the FBI, the Critical Incident Stress Debriefing. That's the team that goes out when like Oklahoma City bombing happened, the World Trade Center happened. There's a group of FBI agents that are trained in debriefing rescue workers, and I was part of that team. But I remember jogging one morning, and I was like, it sounds dramatic, but I can be dramatic. It's like my soul is dying. It's like my soul is literally dying. If I don't make a change, my soul will die, wither up and die. And if I died tomorrow, is this what I want for my life? Because I had a friend, a very young friend, actually unexpectedly pass away right about that time. And I thought, oh, heck no, I need to get busy because my time could be next week or it could be tomorrow. And I've got a lot of things to do and this is not the path. And you're right. And everybody was like, what? Have you lost your ever-loving mind? To include my parents. It was like, what are you doing? Because it's a good career. It's good money. It's prestigious. And the retirement is phenomenal. My colleagues that I went to Quantico with have now retired and far from retiring. But I did. I left everything and went back to school to get a master's in social work. And all my friends are like, Crystal, you're not going to make any money in social work. Not even my friends. Everyone gives you unsolicited advice. College professors, colleagues, like social workers don't make any money. I'm like, yeah, okay. So they don't make any money. And I left and it was a very quick decision. That's one thing FBI taught me too, make a decision really fast, right? Because if you have a bad guy or a bad girl, a bad woman, anyone that's got a gun trained on you, you got to make a decision right that minute if you're going to shoot them or not, right? So I'm really good at making fast decisions. And sometimes that's not always a good thing. But I wound up 6 months later in New Mexico getting a master's degree. And don't regret it. I mean, I love this career. It's so rewarding and it's fun. And there's things that you can do in the field to make money. It's like that when people tell you don't do this because there's no money in it, that's not true. It could be true, but it doesn't have to be your truth. And that was 20 years ago that happened. And then I just shifted again 6 months ago. It's still the same type of work, but in writing, I'm doing writing and I'm doing private practice and I'm not, working with the military any longer. So for me, it's hard for me to really I understand, but it's hard for me to really, I guess, get why some people's like, if you're miserable, then change. Well, I'm too afraid. Well, what are you afraid of? Well, what if I fail? Like, well, what if you don't? Like, no one's going to kill you. No one's going to torture you. You try it. And so, but people are petrified to leave a career or a relationship or where they're living, even though they're miserable, they're terrified of trying something new. And on a logical stance, I understand that, but I know if they just did it, it wouldn't be as scary as they think. Not that there wouldn't be rough patches, but there's nothing really to fear. You just go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So take us to the author side now, because again, I love the idea that we can talk about you as a child solving crime, as an adult solving crime. And that whole piece of your life, I think, really feeds into your author journey. And I really, really like to kind of go here because, again, we talked about you transforming personally, but now you are dedicating your time and your efforts to helping people transform through working with you, but also through your writing. And you have a mission. Can you kind of walk us through how did you land on this as your mission in life to fill your soul and find your purpose? Why are you writing about what you're doing?
When I started writing, I did it for travel writing because I thought, how fun is that? I'm living overseas. I might as well write for travel writing. But I knew that I love to read, but writing's more than putting words to paper. It's much more than that, much, much more. So I took some classes in writing. And then COVID hit, and a teacher friend of mine, who I've known my whole life, said, I've read some of your articles, your travel writing articles, and I think you'd be a great children's author. And I thought, well, she must be saying that because I'm kind of immature and childlike. And that was the narrative that I had for myself, is that she must think I'm so, I guess I'm not so much immature, but I'm very playful. And I think that helps working with kids so much, is that playfulness is still there. And a friend of mine who's a teacher as well just said, no, I don't believe that's what she meant at all. I think she meant that there's a gift to writing children's books. People think anyone can write a children's book, but to write a good children's book, there's a technique and an energy about it. And that's what she was meaning. And I've worked with children and teens and families for 20 years. And what I have found that people are individual and they have unique issues, but there are universal issues that we all face. We all have rational and irrational fear that I was talking about earlier. We all want to help our friends when they're struggling. We all struggle when we're going through a change or some kind of a transition. We've all been judged. We've all judged. And so there's this universal generalities that I've seen working with people for the 20 years that I thought, well, gosh, I could write a book for kids to learn these things, because some kids have grown-ups that read to them, and that's great. And I can have a book that grown-ups could read to kids. But there are some kids that grown-ups don't read to them. But if they could be in a library or a teacher could read to them, they could get these messages through books. And I thought it's so much effective, right, to write a book that potentially 1,000 kids could read, 400 kids could read, than me working with 10 kids at once. And so the books that I write, they're not for conservatives or liberals or Christians or non-Christians or Buddhists. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you believe. They are universal human truths that we all deal with. And it's not. And I wanted to come at it from a way that's not judgy. A friend of mine said social emotional learning is a hot thing in schools right now, which I didn't really know. I mean, I've been doing social emotional learning with kids that I've worked with forever. I just didn't have that name to it. I named it other things, I guess, life skills. And what she told me is that what is out there, I think grown-ups sometimes forget that kids don't really, they tend to tell kids what to do. Do this, do that, and talk down to them in a way. Like they don't know any better. I don't think grown-ups do it with any negative intention whatsoever. It's just, I'm the grown-up, you're the kid, and I know more than you. And it's very didactic. And kids they get things on a subtle level that we don't give them credit for. And I know as a grown-up, I don't like unsolicited advice. I've had it all my life and I don't like it. It annoys me. I like advice when I ask and I seek it. But for someone to just give me advice randomly, it's not something I particularly care for. And why would kids either? And so I followed the advice of my friend who's in early childhood development. And she said, write a book that has fun characters to show kids. Don't tell them, but show them. Have them fall in love with the characters. And then they will make up their mind. Like, oh, okay, I can do that, I've got 2 dogs and a cat that give me lots of, inspiration for personalities. And as I was writing the book, I would send it back and forth with this consultant friend of mine, and she would send it back. She ended up editing for me, and she would send it back and say, show me, don't tell me. Like, what do you mean? Can you do it? It's like, no, I'm not going to write it for you, but show me, don't tell me. And I go, what does that mean? What does that mean? And and as I was writing it, I finally got it. And really what it is the way I pictured it in my head as I'm walking and I'm holding the hands of all these children, like, let's go on a journey. And as we go on a journey, maybe you see a flower, maybe you see a butterfly, maybe you see a dog, maybe you see a bird. But whatever you see, you take that with you. And I invite you to take all of those experiences along with you. And that's what I wanted for the story, is the lessons are presented to take or to not take. And it's never, like, the animals have a conversation about it, and then it's kind of left. And then it goes a little bit again, and then it's left. And what the beautiful thing about it is, did you have a chance to read the story, Dave?
Yeah, I've been going through it.
So there's a section in the book, and I had the illustrator. One of the things I wanted for the kids to get was empathy. because empathy is such an important thing. And the caterpillar is about to get squished by the foot by Samantha. And on the opposing page are these spot illustrations. Because on one page is just the illustration, one page is just the text with little spot illustrations. And the illustrator put a bee and a mouse and a spider. And they have this facial expression looking at the caterpillar, a look of horror. And so I asked the kids when I read it to them, what do you think? I always go with thinking before feeling. What do you think the spider and the bee and the mouse is thinking? And we went the whole thing, talked about empathy, but we went back and when the kids said they're thinking about how they can help the caterpillar. And that wasn't even a storyline that came out from the book, but I loved it that that's where their mind went. And we had such a rich conversation. I asked the kids, like, what do you mean help the caterpillar? I go, they're little. What's going to keep Samantha from squishing all three of them? And what can they do? So they were coming up with these elaborate plans to work as a team to save the caterpillar. And one of the kids said, well, the bee could sting Samantha. It's true. That's an option. And the other kid said, well, I think maybe what we could do is find something that they could do where Samantha's not hurt. And I thought that was so profound that the villain, and Samantha doesn't continue to be a villain, but in this particular scenario, she's the villain. They wanted the villain to go away and not hurt the caterpillar, but they didn't want to hurt the villain. And that, to me, is true empathy. And I didn't lead the kids there. They did it themselves. And it was, and even talking about it gives me goosebumps. It was such a magical moment. And so then we talked about, like, do you think maybe there's going to be a time in your life where there's someone like Samantha that seems more powerful and bigger and stronger than you, but you want to help someone? Is that going to be a possibility for you? Because that is always going to be in life, right? There's not always, but often in life, there's something there that's bigger than us that we want to protect someone from, or we want to protect ourselves from. And it's scary to do that. So sometimes we don't. Mm-hmm. And I just loved that as children,
That's
they were.
So,
Isn't that profound?
I love it. I love it. I love it. And the fact that they came up with that on their own without being guided or directed to think, or like you said, the fact that they came up with this, that is just, that's amazing. So from your perspective, and all the things that you've seen throughout your career, and again, going back to all the things you've been a part of, what part of empathy do you think is missing today that you're hoping to rebirth or regenerate in the hearts and minds of kids? What part of empathy is lacking right now?
I guess when you say what part of empathy, I guess I want to make sure I answer your question correctly. What do you mean by part of? Because I see empathy as kind of one thing. Okay.
Is there a certain element of empathy? Because I just think like is there the action side of empathy, or is it just do we think about empathy but do we not act? Are we giving empathy, or how are we receiving empathy? Like there's so many different little avenues around empathy that I just kind of wondering what you're kind of seeing and what's kind of in your mind when you're writing.
I see what you mean. So empathy is such a big word, right? Because I think at the base level, it's so important for us to, as humans, be able to have empathy for any creature, anything. To feel something when another living being is being hurt, to be able to feel that. Now, you may not be able to do anything about it, but to feel it. And I think it becomes very scary in our society when that's not there anymore. When someone can be part of, say, a violent gang and get to that place where that part of them is so blocked off and hidden that they don't feel it anymore. Because when we don't have the capacity to feel another's suffering, then we can do very cruel things. And when we can just have that capacity to feel it. Now there's just feeling it, having that aspect to feel it. And then there's that feeling it and then doing something too. Kind of maybe that's another step to it. But I think the first step is just feeling it. And from what I've been hearing with a lot of educators, the year of COVID where there wasn't any school and kids were less relating person to person and more online, that shifted something for them socially. And I think you can have maybe not so great social skills, but still feel empathy. But then as those social skills start to fall apart, I think that empathy can also fall apart. And so really starting with, because it's a feeling, right? It's, like if I put my hand on the table and I smashed it, kind of like you would have a sense of, ooh, I bet that hurt, because you would have a reaction. And it's important for children to get that, that to care about another's suffering. And then to take that piece and then to build the other skills around it. And how behaviors, because when you care about someone else's suffering and then you learn how a behavior can contribute to another person's suffering, that's another level. But that empathy is the base, I believe.
Nice. So for your writings and for what's happening with your business through Operation Transformation, can you take me a little bit behind the scenes and people listening on what Operation Transformation is and kind of the overall mission that you're using this to impact people's lives?
My vision, and I think, and you did ask me this already, and I'm sorry, I kind of sidetracked. My vision, if you ask me, what is your why, what is your vision? It's to raise the vibration of the planet one person at a time. And what I mean by that is, we all know the word vibe. We've all had that experience where, ooh, that's a bad vibe. Like maybe someone's having a bad day and you just feel that negativity from them. It just, not that person's bad, but in that moment, there's a bad vibe. Or you meet people that you're just like, oh my gosh, that's a ray of sunshine. That person just has such a good vibe and they're almost magnetic. You just really want to be around them because that vibe is so positive. And you may not have even had really much of an interaction with that person. Maybe they checked you out at the grocery store, but you came away feeling a little bit happier. And then that impacts you throughout the day. And then if you're feeling a little bit happier, then you pass it on. And it's kind of an invisible thing that keeps happening, but you feel it, right? I don't know. When I've bought houses, I go to look at houses, and sometimes you can walk into a house that nobody's lived in and you can feel it. Like, this was a happy house. This was a sad house, and so when we, no matter what's happening to us in our life, if we can do a practice of gratitude and find something, a good nugget somehow in our day, and just come from a place of a higher vibe, a happier vibe. Not that we're not always happy. You can be sad and grieving and still have a good vibe. And that it impacts kids. It impacts everyone that we get into contact with. And I feel that if we're living our life on a path that we're meant to, that means, maybe living in an environment and a location that we enjoy. Maybe I enjoy the ocean. Maybe I enjoy the mountains. Or I need a community of friends, or a job that I like. When we do something that we enjoy, then we're just happier. We have more gratitude throughout the day. And so maybe I'm, traumatized by something that happened to me in my life. And if I can get treatment for that, I can heal from that. And then I just feel better. Maybe depression or anxiety or whatever is weighing us down. When we can heal from that and gain skills to get better, we're just happier. And every one person that's happier affects how many people that they are around, right? I mean, we saw that through COVID, right? One person can have COVID and then pretty soon, 100 people have it. And so if we can spread our joy and our good vibe the same way, it can make an impact on the planet. And I don't mean like I'm going to save the planet. It's just, again, one person at a time. Having one person feel better then impacts every person that person lives with. Maybe their children, their spouse, their friends. And And so with my business, it's the books that I do, going into the schools and doing the readings, doing the social emotional learning lessons with the kids, doing blogs. I am a lover of self-help books. And so if you like self-help stuff, I've got blogs that are free. It's nothing that it charges you to read a blog to maybe get some wellness ideas and therapy or even life coaching. I'm in a job and I'm stuck and I just don't know how to get out of it. And so then helping people make that transition. But the family therapy, working with kids, anything that makes a positive change. So to me, I see transformation as a change, a positive change. And change can be hard and scary. And so sometimes it's hard for people to take that step.
Yeah. And I know you've talked in the past and other venues as well, the whole idea of a butterfly and the transformation that happens. And coming from one thing to something different, and the beauty that happens in there, and that's something I really like, and I love that you capture that as well.
Yeah, and in the whole book, hope is a butterfly if you don't squish the caterpillar. Even in that title is a meaning, right? Because how many times have we in our lives kept ourselves from becoming a butterfly because we squish ourselves as a caterpillar before we even get there? So many people were our own worst enemy, right? There's that negative voice in our head. Well, who are you to do that? Well, who do you think you are? You're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You're not whatever enough. Yeah. And that squishes our own caterpillar, and it keeps us from becoming a butterfly.
Exactly. And the one thing I think too is, while you're talking, I'm thinking of when for example, if we go into a room and it's like some kind of meeting or something, and we go in this room and we have interaction with people and we leave and go, you know what, Crystal, I really didn't get anything out of that. But at the same time thinking, well, maybe we weren't meant to get something out of that situation, that encounter with others. Maybe we were meant to give something instead. Mm-hmm. Maybe that was the reason why we were there, is to not be always receiving on the receiving end, but maybe on the giving side of it. And I'm seeing that through your content and through your writings, is you're there giving. You're there providing an opportunity for people to get from you. So you're coming in with that attitude and that heart. And I just think that's something that maybe as adults, as children, maybe we come with a more giving attitude to a situation than I'm here for something for me and I'm in it for me and I want to walk away with something. Oh my gosh. Maybe we're supposed to be here giving it instead.
Oh, absolutely. I've had experiences in various groups where I think, this is going to be a fun, supportive group. Like, this is not supportive. It's just take, me, and it's like, oh my goodness. And, I'm even right now I'm listening to Bob Proctor, who I love him, by the way. And he talks about to be successful and to be wealthy, he talks a lot about getting rich, but to be successful, deliver a good product, but it's about service, not necessarily doing everything for free, but what is it to not so much see about what can I get from this exchange, but what am I willing to give you back? And the interesting thing is, I believe this very strongly, that you get back what you give. And I don't necessarily do it with an agenda. I'm going to give this with the agenda to get back more. It's just kind of an interesting law of the universe. And I even noticed, like with the kids going into the schools and doing readings, they were so, I don't know, something happened with the kids and I had so much fun with them. But I was at a Christmas bazaar selling the books and the kids would just come up and give me a hug. And to me, it's like, wow, how cool is that? That to me, the kid wasn't paying me anything, like when I go to the schools and read, they're not the ones with the checkbooks buying the books, I'm doing it because I really want the book to be in front of as many kids as possible and for them to get it and to fall in love with the characters. And when they come back, because they were so touched by something in that interaction that we had, like that's such an energy exchange that I feel like I got more out of it in so many ways, because when children and teens give you that level of affection, it's so authentic and so genuine and so full of that love energy that it's hard to even explain it. If that makes sense. And it's just, there's such value in that. Yeah. So I think you're right. If you can go into a place where, like, maybe you're in that meeting and you're thinking, oh gosh, is this meeting going to be over soon because I'm not getting anything out of it? Maybe you sit at that meeting and you smile at the person having to do the presentation because maybe they had a bad day. And you nod and you give them your attention. That might be helpful for them. And just like, hey, there was this one person in the meeting that wasn't being kind of a brat and they listened to me and helped me feel validated. There's value in that, right? So I think that's such a good point, Dave, that you make, that it sometimes is about what we're giving in the exchange. Because we never know how that will affect another person. The rolling of our eyes, how that affects them, but also the smile.
Yeah. And even just the little things about being on my phone and while you're talking, I'm like, oh yeah. And not communicating and not being in the moment, know.
That's huge. And you say it's a little thing, but that is huge, because what you're telling me in that moment is, you're not worth my time. My phone and whoever is on the other side of this is worth more to me than you are. So it seems like it's a little thing, but in my mind, it's not a little thing. It's a very big thing. Mm-hmm. And to the point where, if you even think about it, if you're in a meeting and you're waiting for someone to walk in, as soon as someone walks in the door, if you smile, hi, and not in a fake way, but in a genuine, hi, good to see you, right there. When you feel it, when someone lights up when you walk into a room, you feel it, or you feel it when they don't even acknowledge you when you walk into a room, right?
Exactly.
Or you don't even look up from your phone.
Exactly. And that's on a side note, that's what I love about podcasting, is I get to have time with you as my guest, listen and learn from you and interact with you with no distraction, and really hear your heart and your message. And that's what I love, is just that interaction, and being able to have time with you is amazing. And I really do appreciate the fact that you have time to talk about your book and talk about the things you're doing. But before we close off, Crystal, can you just give people a sense of what it's like when they come over and they want to work with you and they want to know more? What kind of things are they going to experience by interacting with you and kind of working together with you? Can you kind of take us behind the tape so we can get a sense of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Probably because of my law enforcement rooms, I'm very matter of fact. Let's get things done. So I'm very nice, but I'm not touchy-feely. So come in and we're going to do, it's a dance, right? Because I don't want just you to, tell me all of your secrets and expose yourself in an assessment without us having a certain rapport. But I would do with therapy a very thorough front-end assessment, because I really want to get your history. I want to know all about you, because I see patterns. And so as I can see your patterns in your history, we get a very thorough front-end assessment. I can see where your initial wounding is. Where is your wounding? Where is your scars? Where is your trauma? There's a laser focus on that. And then I like to do a personality assessment called the NEO. It's very thorough, but then we can really hone in on your strengths. Like, look at all these strengths that you have. So let's take all of these strengths, let's laser focus on this wounding, and let's heal that, and let's get to your goals. And let's get it done. Let's define your goals. Let's be very specific. Now we can change that if we need to, but we're here. Let's get here. And I'm very, I think, directed in that, whether it's through EMD. And I do a lot of evidence-based type of therapy, because my philosophy is I want to do some evidence-based means it's researched. So there's research behind it that demonstrates that it's effective. Because if you're coming to me for therapy, your time is worth something. The money's worth something. And so let's make the most of your time to help you get better. If you come to me and it's like, hey, I want my house built, let's build your house. I don't want to get sidetracked and say, well, you have a dog, so let's build a fence for your dog. It's like, no, let's build your house. Let's get that foundation built, and then let's see where we go from there. And I have a tendency to push and then come back, and then push, and then come back, because I don't want to push you so far beyond where you're ready to go. But I also, if I don't push you a little bit, we're never gonna make movement. I don't want to be on a treadmill running for 10 years. Let's get from here to here. And that's really more my approach is let's find out what's going on. I'll take the different modalities that I have as tools and customize them for your specific needs.
Awesome. I love it. Can you share too, Crystal, where people can find the book? They want to read this book. They want to share this with their kids. How do we connect with that as well?
Absolutely. So my website, it's crystalcook.com. And you can buy the book on there. You can buy the book on website on Amazon as well. It's Hope is a Butterfly If You Don't Squish the Caterpillar. My website has them. I have where you can pre-order the next 2 books in the series. So crystalcook.com. You can read my blogs. You can sign up for therapy. You can sign up for personality assessment. And also the books is all there. And also with the books is a free conversations guide that goes along with the books for grown-ups who want to use it to kind of do what I do with the social emotional learning, and a free coloring book page. And then also when you go to the website, you can get a free goal setting and goal getting worksheet as well.
It's great. And I was looking through the companion manual that you sent off to me in advance. Great questions, great content that really would support the book. I love that you're thinking about all the people that could interact with this book, and you're kind of using this as a way to reach more than just the children, but I see stuff in there for adults and grandparents, and it's well done and well put together.
Thank you. Oh, and the book is in Spanish as well. So if you want it in Spanish, you can always, I will email you for free the PDF of the English, because some people, if they buy it in Spanish, they want to have the English to go as a companion. So that's an option as well.
Amazing. Awesome. Crystal, thank you so much for taking us behind the police tape, taking us back, solving crimes, helping our community, and now transforming. And again, I love what you said about with the kids' response to not stinging the girl and not squishing the all that, and just the fact that they were able to come up with an answer that astounded you and astounded the adults around that are like, wow, empathy really does matter, and what you're doing matters. So thank you for being a great illustration of that, transforming your career into a way to help others and to find that spot where you're finding your purpose by helping others find theirs. So, Crystal, thank you for being part of the podcast.
Thank you for having me. This has been so much fun. It's been great talking to you.
Awesome. Everyone, please go check out the show notes. We'll have all the links that we talked about there, and we would love for you to connect with Crystal and let her know that you heard about her on the Living the Next Chapter podcast, because I'm pretty sure she'll be excited to hear that you heard this discussion, because it's one thing to see a book on a shelf or on a website. It's another thing to hear it from the heart of the author. So thank you for being part of the show, Crystal. Okay, well, thank you for being here on Living the Next Chapter. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We enjoyed having you here on the podcast. Our authors are amazing. I hope you appreciate their time, their effort to make this possible. If you know an author, if you want to recommend an author, that's a good idea. Hey, if there's an author that you really would love to hear about or hear from, if you tell me, if you send me a message, you speak pipe on our website, livingthenextchapter.com, send me an email, go over to livingthenextchapter.com, send us a message. We will forward your message to that author and say, listen, you are being requested to be on Living the Next Chapter. Our audience can't wait to hear from you. You can help shape the show. Yeah, you. You could do that right now, actually. You got a minute, right? Okay, how about you do that? livingthenextchapter.com. I'll see you over there. Recommend an author. Yeah. See ya. Thanks.
Mindshift Power Podcast, the podcast for teenagers and those who work with them. There's a huge problem in America today. There's a very large disconnect between teenagers and the adults who work with them. I'm looking to bridge that gap with real, raw, honest conversation, not held back by the chains of political correctness. You cannot solve a problem you do not understand. Want to understand teenagers today? Listen to this podcast. This podcast is for teens in the U.S. and Canada. To learn more, go to fatimabay.com/podcast or just look for Mind Shift Power Podcast on any listening platform. I look forward to you being a faithful listener.